Thank you for joining the City of Los Angeles's discussion on our draft goals and strategies for the assessment of fair housing plan. So we want to get started. Thank you for being patient and waiting. I am Nancy Tuamakwaboa. I am with the Los Angeles Housing Department, and we have other staff here from the Housing Department as well. So I will go ahead and turn it over to him.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Joel Montano with the Los Angeles Housing Department and Policy Unit. Happy to be here with you.
And we also have folks from the Housing Authority.
Hi, Ann Lynch from the Housing Authority, City of Los Angeles. I'll pass it to Patty.
Or we'll go ahead and pass it to Mosaic. Melissa, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I'm Melissa Mayu with Mosaic Community Planning, and we are the consulting partner that is helping with this study. And we have a couple other folks from Mosaic as well. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica Gay. I'm an associate planner here with Mosaic.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heaven, also an associate planner with Mosaic.
Thanks. Let's see. Nancy, did you have anything else or should I get started?
You can get started. Thank you. I think we need to have probably instructions, right, in regards to our language channels.
Yeah, definitely. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items. First, we have Spanish interpretation available for the meeting. So everyone will need to select the language channel that they would like to hear the meeting in. You can do that by clicking on the interpretation button on the lower part of your screen and choosing between English and Spanish. So I'll give a second for folks to be able to make those choices. Carmen, did you have a question or need any assistance doing that?
I need to listen in Spanish, but I can find how I can do it.
Ben, would you be able to repeat those instructions in Spanish?
But I can find how I can get in Spanish.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. We also have a sign language interpreter, and you can choose to see the ASL interpretation using that same interpretation button on the bottom of your screen. A couple other notes about how we'll be using Zoom today. When we have opportunities for comments, you can use the raise hand button to signal that you would like to speak. You just click on reactions at the bottom of the screen and use the raise hand option. You can control your audio and video using the mute and start video buttons. And you can also make comments during the meeting using the chat feature. We'll try to answer questions that you have in the chat, but if we're not able to answer you tonight, someone will be in touch with you by email afterwards. So during the meeting, we'll also be using Slido to ask a few questions for you to respond to. So that's a separate program outside of Zoom. And if you'd like to go ahead and get ready for that, if you open another browser on your computer or on your phone and go to Slido, that's Slido.com, slido.com. You'll be ready when we get to those questions. When you get to Slido, it will ask for a code for our meeting, and ours is 220. And then finally, if you're joining us by phone, please use *6 to mute or unmute your sound, and use *9 to raise your hand. And I'll mention these again before we begin our discussion. So we've already done introductions, but we'll start with an overview of the assessment of fair housing. I know we have some folks that participated in meetings previously for this project, but I think we have some new joinees tonight who maybe this is their first time hearing about it. So we'll start with an overview and then dive into kind of the meat of this meeting, which is talking about the draft fair housing goals and strategies. And then we'll close with some next steps about the project. The assessment of fair housing is an analysis that is going to look at the fair housing landscape within the city of Los Angeles. It's required to be completed every 5 years because the city receives grant funds through HUD. So HUD requires this project. And as Nancy mentioned, it's being led by LAHD and the Housing Authority with assistance from Mosaic Community Planning. So when we talk about fair housing, what we're generally talking about is everybody's right to participate in the housing market, to own, sell, purchase, or rent the housing of their choice without fear of unlawful discrimination. That includes things like renting or buying a home, obtaining homeowners or renters insurance, having access to housing loans, and having fair property appraisals. Under the Federal Fair Housing Act, everyone is protected from housing discrimination based on race or ethnicity, color, religion, national origin, sex, family status, and disability. We refer to these as protected classes because people are protected from housing discrimination based on these characteristics. Along with the Fair Housing Act, many states have additional protections, including the state of California. So California has a series of laws that expanded fair housing protections to include several more protected classes, which you see listed here. They include marital status, age, ancestry, national origin, or immigration status, language, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, genetic information, veteran or military status, occupation, and other arbitrary factors. The state also protects people from discrimination based on source of income, which includes the use of Section 8 housing choice vouchers or similar types of housing assistance. And then additionally, the city of Los Angeles has laws that provide housing protection for some additional protected classes, including based on employment status, citizenship status, and primary language. So you can see that there's considerable additional protections offered at the state and local levels. Here we have a few examples of actions that would be considered illegal discrimination if they're based on protected class. So that includes telling someone that a house is not available for rent or for sale when it really is, or denying mortgage loan applications based on protected class. Landlords or lenders can't apply different terms to a lease or a loan based on protected characteristics. So for example, a landlord couldn't charge a higher security deposit to a family, a household that has kids than to a household without kids, because that family status is protected. Similarly, a property manager couldn't steer families with children to one part of an apartment development, and real estate agents can't steer home buyers or limit showings to certain neighborhoods based on protected characteristics. And then finally, refusing to make reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities and refusing to accept Section 8 housing choice vouchers are also examples of discrimination that you might see in your community. It's a complete list of ways that discrimination is present, but it illustrates some of the ways that these things might happen, kind of beyond just refusing to rent or sell housing to someone. So HUD's fair housing rule, called Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing, or shortened to AFFH, calls on cities to take a more critical look at the role of housing in their communities. The AFFH rule requires cities to look at access to community resources and opportunities. So things like good jobs, good schools, transit, grocery stores, healthcare facilities, and a clean environment. Cities need to consider whether everyone has access to these resources, regardless of their race, ethnicity, or any other protected class. The AFFH rule also requires cities to take meaningful actions to overcome patterns of segregation and to create communities that are inclusive for everyone. Cities must work to reduce affordable housing needs and other barriers that limit access to opportunities and resources. The state of California also has its own affirmatively furthering fair housing law, which requires all cities and counties to assess fair housing as part of their housing elements. So this is a requirement at both the city and state level. So the study we're working on now, an assessment of fair housing, is, as I mentioned, an analysis of the fair housing landscape within Los Angeles and a plan for how to expand fair housing through 2028 and beyond. Under the federal AFFH rule, all grantees are required to complete a fair housing study like this every 5 years. So demonstrating how they will affirmatively further fair housing, identify some actionable strategies for improving housing access, and reduce barriers to opportunity. In addition to meeting state and federal requirements, the AFH will be important for local leaders who are making decisions about housing policies and resources. It's built on community input, and one way residents can voice their opinions to the city and to HACLA leadership. We're taking this study to advance past fair housing work, including the city's housing elements and the city's previous assessment of fair housing from 2018. Ultimately, what comes out of this plan is an action-oriented strategy that can impact the city's decisions about how it might spend grant funds that it receives for housing, community development, and homelessness. The strategies will also shape projects, programs, and policies by the city and HACLA. And finally, the final plan will be adopted by City Council and HACLA leadership and really represent their commitment to implement these activities. So a quick overview of where we are in the process and kind of the work that we have done so far. We've been working on this project for about 1.5 years, beginning with some data gathering last summer and including some community meetings, stakeholder meetings, focus groups that occurred last fall and into this spring. For the past several months, we've been working on the draft plan and are now at a place where we're ready to share a draft plan and goals and strategies with the community. So that's what we are doing today, really focusing on these goals and strategies. Later in October and into December, we will hold a 45-day public comment period. So when you signed up for this meeting, if you said that you would like to be kept on the email list for this project, you will be getting an email letting you know when that draft is available and how you can view it. We'll also have a public hearing in November that you'll hear a little bit more about today. And then Based on the input that we get from the public during those 45 days, we'll prepare a revised final version of the plan that will ultimately go forward for City Council and HACLA approval, and then submission to HUD. Let's see. So as I mentioned, we did some substantial community engagements in the fall and spring that included about 7 community meetings with 150 participants, a survey that about 500 community members and 75 organizations completed, focus groups with over 170 participants, and then consultation meetings with about 275 stakeholders that represented different agencies and organizations in Los Angeles that deal with fair housing or access to community resources, a variety of topics that we engaged folks on. Also, the Assessment of Fair Housing website is where you could go if you weren't able to participate in those meetings earlier this year and last year. If you'd like to see them, they are all up on the website, and we'll put this meeting up there as well so that folks are able to see what we talked about, even if they were not able to join the meeting. So out of that work that we did and that engagement, we identified several fair housing issues that were identified by community members. And you see some of them listed here. So I think one of the biggest that we heard was limited availability of affordable housing and how that impacts some of those protected groups that I talked about. We heard about groups that faced significant barriers to obtaining rental housing, whether that was economic barriers or barriers maybe related to credits or application processes, but difficulty accessing rental housing and rental housing in neighborhoods that folks would choose to live in. We heard about the need to address severe habitability issues and to make some improvements to the complaints process or habitability complaint process so that people are able to have resolutions regarding habitability issues in their homes. We heard about limited access to resources in historically affordable neighborhoods and the need for expanding education, access, and enforcement of existing fair housing laws. I think that's one place where kind of the idea of building on past work particularly comes in, that out of the last assessment of fair housing, several new ordinances were born. And now at this point, I think we're at a place where we can assess kind of how well those are working and ways that there might be opportunities to improve them. We heard about housing challenges for people with different physical, emotional, or social abilities, and the need to continue expanding access to accessible housing. And then housing challenges for people experiencing homelessness and the need for greater housing and services that serve folks who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. So based on these issues, we will, we're at the point where we have developed some draft goals and strategies, and that's really what we want to talk about today. So for the 5 housing issues that we've identified in the plan, our 5 housing goals, we have a set of strategies that we are hoping to get your feedback on. So I think that's what we will dive into next. But wanted to kind of give you this idea of what this affordable housing plan, or excuse me, fair housing plan will include. The action plan part of it will really identify specific goals, specific strategies, some metrics and timeframes for completion, and then what parties are responsible for enacting these strategies and who their partners might be. So when you look at our draft plan in hopefully a few weeks, you'll be able to see kind of all of those things identified. But at this point, I think we can move into the discussion of goals and strategies. So if you are able to, you can use this QR code that you see on the screen there to access the Slido page, or go to slido.com and use the code 220. So that's how you will be kind of giving your inputs on these goals and strategies. And again, just a reminder, if you have a question or would like to leave a comment, you can raise your hand. You can use your mute button to speak once we have called on you. Georgette, I see your hands up. Do you have a question? Okay, I'll move on then. So our first goal that we would like to discuss is increasing access to the supply of affordable housing, especially in higher opportunity areas where high housing costs are a significant barrier. So we heard, I think one of the strongest things that we heard from participants was that housing is just unaffordable. So we heard significantly and saw in data that it's very difficult to afford rental housing, and that difficulty is more impactful on Black or African American households. Latino and Hispanic households are having more difficulty affording homes in comparison to white or Asian households. So this was one of our key goals and one of the key housing issues that we saw. So in terms of strategies, you will see the suggested strategies that we have identified at this point listed here. And in slido.com, you are able to, we're asking you to identify the top 3 that you feel like the city and HACLA should prioritize to address this goal of expanding access to affordable housing. So the goals that you'll see there include expediting affordable housing development, focusing on high opportunity and gentrifying areas. So really a focus on using funds to develop more affordable housing. You'll also see identifying and facilitating the use of city-owned and other public land for affordable housing development. So focusing on using some city and public property to develop more affordable housing. We have a strategy related to removing affordable housing barriers, by implementing the new zoning code through community plan updates. So making those plan updates in neighborhoods throughout the city to implement the new zoning code that the city has developed. We have a strategy related to completing an inclusionary zoning study and evaluating recommended strategies. So considering the potential for inclusionary zoning throughout the city. A strategy related to collaborating with the CAO's office, particularly their equity, performance management, and innovation team. That team is developing an equity index. So using that index to help determine fair housing, or excuse me, affordable housing locations and other, just making other decisions. You'll see a strategy related to continuing and improving policies designed to help voucher holders have greater choice in neighborhoods. So things like the small area rents program, mobility vouchers, helping folks move to a wider variety of neighborhoods throughout the city. We have a strategy related to expanding the availability of accessible units and how people are able to access information about affordable and accessible units. And then a strategy related to using Project Home Key funds. So that would be making use of state money to develop affordable housing for people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. And then finally tracking units developed through the density bonus and transit-oriented communities program. And I can see from the folks that have participated so far that I think our top priority so far is really expediting the development of affordable housing and using city-owned land for affordable housing developments and expanding the availability of accessible units. So let's see. Give it a little bit more time for everyone to be able to put their vote in here. Give you a couple more seconds. Whoop, sorry, go back. All right, so I think we might have all our voters so far, and we can see that those top 3 items have changed or have not changed. And you should be able to continue making votes on this throughout the meeting if you want to jump back to this page. But for now, I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is asking for any ideas that you have. So maybe strategies that you didn't see in number 1 that you would like to see the city consider. And I know that we've been getting some of those in the chat as well, but if you have ideas that you haven't left in the chat that you would like to share, please add those in now. See, we have some folks typing. So we have housing for teachers and educators, ensuring that development is focused on deeply affordable units. And that is something that we heard from participants too, that a lot of times they hear it's affordable housing, but still you have to make kind of above what income they have to be able to live there. Let's see, would anyone like to share a little bit about the idea that they've shared or expand a little bit on the idea that they've shared here? Rose or Armin?
This is Armin. Not regarding this topic, I have nothing to share. What I wanted to talk about was more of the Section 8 vouchers.
Okay. Do you want to share that now? Is it related
Sure, yeah.
to?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'd love to share it. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'd love to share that now. So I had applied for Section 8 about 7 years ago. And then finally in 2021, during COVID, I was sent a letter that for me to go get an interview. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to go to that interview because I was in the hospital with COVID and I had diagnosed with long COVID. And I called during my while I was sick. I called the office and I told yes.
I think it might be more helpful if you could leave your email in the chat, and someone from the Housing Authority could get in touch with you after the meeting, so that we could kind of stay focused on these goals and strategies.
All right.
Yeah,
All right.
sorry about that. Yeah, thank you. Let's see, Penny, would you like to share? I saw your hand come up when I asked. Okay, well, if not, that's fine.
What, before you move on, Penny, it seems as though you were speaking. Maybe can you unmute? Yeah, you're still muted. You're still muted, so we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Oh, I said I do have comments and I'd like to listen a little bit more. I want to do what the other gentleman is going to do, and I'm going to email. Is it LA City that I'm going to email to ask a question for someone to get back with me later on an issue that sort of pertains to this but doesn't? So I want to keep on your schedule and on your regimen.
So we have a email for our group, so I'll put it in the chat, Penny.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, great. Well, it looks like we've had a lot of comments come in here, and I'll give a couple more seconds for folks that are still typing, although you should be able to continue providing that information in Slido as the meeting moves on. So the next goal that we want to talk about is preserving and maintaining the quality of existing affordable housing, including subsidized and rent stabilized units. So one of the things that we heard strongly was that kind of because of the affordability needs, there is an increased importance on maintaining the housing that we have. So both preserving the quantity and also the quality, making sure that when folks do call in with housing quality issues or complaints, that they are able to have those resolved. And that when properties go into REAP, when they have kind of more substantial habitability issues, that again, that program resolves those issues and it doesn't become something that kind of continues on. So we'll see another list here of the strategies that the city is considering to address this. So making sure that we are preserving deed restricted housing, affordable housing, and monitoring at-risk developments so that the city and HECLA are able to be proactive as developments reach a period where they might be aging out of their affordability period and taking proactive measures then. Acquiring existing affordable housing. So it might be properties that are currently unsubsidized and privately owned, but that the city and HECLA know are important to maintaining affordability in a neighborhood. And so they are able to acquire those units and maintain their affordability long term. We have a strategy related to enhancing the inspections process. So we heard a lot about the need to improve the complaint-based inspections process to better serve residents, including maybe residents who do not speak English and have some interpretation needs in order to be able to work with inspectors to really make sure that that process is focused on the resident and resolving their needs. And then finally, working with the rent escrow account program to ensure that there really are long-term improvements in housing quality. So doing some outreach with community organizations, folks who have been in REAP properties, and trying to understand how that program could better serve them compared to kind of how it's operating now. So let's see, I can see from our votes that so far the prioritized strategy that people are identifying is related to acquiring existing affordable units. So really bringing new properties kind of into the fold of what the city owns or manages or owns, maybe what HECLA or another agency manages. Wait a few more seconds as people are voting here, and then we'll jump to the next question where we kind of ask for your ideas. All right, so here we go then. This one is, again, kind of that open-ended question. So what other strategies do you think of that you would like to see the city and HECLA take into account to address this goal of preserving the number of affordable housing units, but also preserving housing quality? And I know we're getting some comments in the chat as well. Have some folks typing. Would anyone like to share their ideas out loud? We have a few hands up. Maybe Megan?
Hi, how are you? Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Oh, good. Okay. Just wanted to make sure you could hear me. So, um, there's really not anything being done. Understand the problem of getting in housing, but once you're in housing, there's not being anything done to help or prevent tenant harassment and tenant eviction. Like, I've called the housing department multiple times. First of all, let me express that it takes an exorbitant amount of time to get through. And I know that's because they're overwhelmed. But from our side, you literally spend an afternoon trying to get through. And then when you do get through, there's not a lot of clarity about what your rights are, what is actually happening. You know, you hear stories about, what the judges are doing, and they're throwing things out if people had to try to partial pay, but yet there's no clear and definitive. There's people waiting on rental relief, and landlords are still evicting people. I was in the ULA housing workshop last week, and all sorts of people were expressing, like, what are they supposed to do to encourage their owners to apply for the rental relief? Because this time around, if the owner doesn't apply, they don't have to apply legally. They can just go down and file stuff. And so it's a huge problem, because people that are in housing are in danger of being homeless, which is further adding, this problem, especially right now. And I also want to touch upon the fact that, we are all just recovering from the pandemic, but in LA specifically, there's a huge strike going on that not just affects actors, it's affecting all sorts of business. And they keep releasing the statistics, and Mayor Bass commented on the statistics, but nobody's really doing anything or putting anything in paper to support those people. Because it's affecting restaurants and everything, dry cleaners. And so I know I mentioned a couple things, but they're all sort of related and sort of like help. And the Tahoe, somebody in the comments, a lot of people wrote stuff about the Tahoe tenant anti-harassment ordinance. That they have no real teeth or jurisdiction. I mean, I spent all this time getting all this stuff to them, and they told me to write a declaration and outline. And at the end of it, they're like, we don't really do anything. We can just kind of send a letter. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit more about Tahoe under the next goal.
Okay.
That is something that we have as one of the strategies within the draft AFH at the moment. But
Okay.
yeah, thank you very much for those comments. See. So we've got several comments in looking at oversight for property management companies. Let's see. Turning empty commercial spaces into housing. Some funds for modifications to housing for people with disabilities. And I think that the city does do some of that as already, so kind of continuing to do that. Annual inspections by housing officials. The city does do kind of a regular housing inspections for rental units, but definitely interested in ways that can be improved and how that might become a strategy within the AFH. Let's see. Support for more small to medium-sized projects. A home repair program. Let's see. And it doesn't look like anyone else is typing at the moment. Does anyone want to share a little more about what they wrote, or let's see, SG?
Yes, hello.
Yes.
Hi, thank you. I think, yeah, I sort of, I responded to try to respond to the first poll question and what I had commented on, as well as now the second one. And so now at this point, if I can just try to summarize both of the concerns I had shared, in terms of some concerns towards HACLA as a governing agency or administering of, affordable housing under the fair housing guarantees that HUD requires. It would be, and just from near 20-year experience of being a HACLA client, I've really observed that their own sort of lack of any kind of official or non-official compliance or enforcement or monitoring of their own housing participants or partners, meaning their own landlords, managements, et cetera, properties being funded and agreeing to make sure that, fair housing guarantees are complied with. When there's issues of that nature, fair housing violations or lack of ADA compliance or whatever the case may be, and affordable housing clients or low income housing clients, let alone disabled and participating in special programs vis-a-vis HACLA, don't have any accessible outlets or even entity within the governing agencies to be able to relay such concerns or have any kind of active monitoring of HACLA's own oversight to some degree to ensure, hey, our housing participants are also going to be sort of any kind of checks and balances system to make sure that, compliance to fair housing guarantees is actually not just, abandoned or, their own housing participants are exempt from being in compliance with those standards. Because as housing recipients through these programs, we expect and we understand that HACLA, for example, of course, is responsible to ensure accessibility and ADA compliance and fair housing guarantees. But if they don't have any aspect of their services or programs that also guarantees or monitors to some degree that their own participants receiving funding through their programs are also required, for compliance, it becomes sort of like, again, all these laws and protections that exist. What good is it if they really do truly remain in theory, but no application, no practice, no enforcement? And I think that's a real, it's a challenge that should be viably considered and addressed, because what good is it to have protections or laws in place that are supposed to protect or guarantee things for the disabled community or the low income and marginalized communities, if even the governing agencies won't take any accountability or responsibility for what their own housing providers or participants are actually doing, while being participants of the program.
Okay, so some stronger oversight and enforcement mechanisms within HACLA. Okay, thank you for that comment. I think that, and I appreciate that comment, and I'm happy to have it. I think that I know we still have some hands up, but in order to kind of keep us on schedule, I'm going to move on to the next item. But certainly, if you have comments, you can either leave them in Slido or leave them in the chat, and we will be able to review all of those and incorporate them where appropriate into the plan. So I'll move on now to our third strategy, which I think we alluded to a bit when we mentioned some improvements to Tahoe, which is the tenant anti-harassment ordinance. But the third goal here will involve looking at ways to prevent displacement of people in protected classes and low and moderate income households. So I think throughout this process, we heard often about kind of the need to preserve affordable housing in gentrifying neighborhoods. And also that a lot of times as new investment comes in and kind of neighborhood access to opportunities improves, you see a corresponding increase in housing costs or development that is focused on higher cost housing that can have the potential to displace folks that were living in that community originally and often for many years. So that's what this goal is related to. And I'll click over to the strategies that we have for that so that you all are able to review them and put your votes in here. So these strategies would include acquiring existing housing units in areas vulnerable to gentrification. So a little bit similar to number 2, taking that housing kind of off the private market and making sure that it's preserved as affordable housing. Expediting affordable housing development, particularly in gentrifying areas. Prioritizing funding for education, outreach, and enforcement related to just cause eviction preventions. One of the things that we heard throughout this was that as the city is implementing new eviction protections, that really focusing on getting the word out about those, having people have knowledge about them, and understanding what resources are available if they are facing eviction is going to be very important to the success of those ordinances. Then developing a displacement tool that identifies at-risk areas so that we're able to kind of target prevention strategies. And evaluating the possibility of a local tenant or community opportunity to purchase ordinance. So that would happen when maybe buildings were going into foreclosure or housing that had been affordable was aging out of its affordability period and was possibly going to be sold. Having the option for tenants or community organizations to be able to purchase that housing before it goes on the open market. And then lastly, as we had talked about, looking at some improvements to the tenant anti-harassment ordinance. So some approaches that would maybe give it a little bit more teeth beyond being able to send a letter to landlords. So looking at some administrative citation capacity, but also looking at ways that under that program, some outreach could be done to landlords and to tenants to give them education about sort of rights and responsibilities on both sides, and to give tenants some information about what types of kind of evidence do they need to preserve and provide in order to support harassment claims. So I see that we've had about 30 people vote on these, and we can see that the highest priority that we're seeing is acquiring some of those existing affordable housing units and making some improvements to the tenant anti-harassment ordinance, as well as looking at the possibility of an ordinance that would allow tenants or community organizations an opportunity to purchase housing before it goes on the open market. So thank you everyone for your votes there. I'm gonna jump down to our next slide where it's another one that's open-ended. So asking for your ideas about maybe strategies that you didn't see on that last list, but that you would like to have the city consider, or city and HACLA consider as ways to prevent displacement.
Melissa, if we can break for 1 second, we were able to get another interpreter to join. Thank you. Thank you for everyone's patience.
Okay, so I think that we have got some input come in. Let's see. We have some ideas here, enforcing the right of return, Tahoe improvements, purchasing RSO units and converting to co-ops that tenants could purchase. Some landlord education, particularly related to most vulnerable tenants. Yes, we can. I think, no, I think that's right. You should be in the Spanish channel so that you can interpret to them.
That's fine. Yes, please go to the Spanish channel and start, and that way Benjamin can get a break. So please be on the Spanish channel. I'm not sure. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you everyone for your comments here and in the chat. I'm going to move on to the next goal so that we can stay on target to get through all of them. But please know that we are collecting all the information that you provide through Slido and in the chat as well. So the fourth goal that we have identified is ensuring equal access to housing for people in protected classes, extremely low to moderate income households, and people experiencing homelessness. So this goal really relates less to building or acquiring housing, but more to making sure that folks are able to access what housing exists. So I will go along to the next poll question. And if someone from the Mosaic team wouldn't mind listing that goal, writing that goal in the chat so that people are able to see it as they're responding to this question. But this is goal number 4, related to ensuring equal access to housing for people in protected classes and low-income folks and people experiencing homelessness. So the first goal that we have identified, or strategy identified here, is expanding enforcement of fair housing laws, particularly with a focus on source of income protection. So one of the things I think that we heard pretty strongly throughout this process was that for people who have housing choice vouchers, it can be very difficult to find housing that will take them. So really a need to have more proactive measures to ensure that source of income protection is truly protected, is enforced. Doing fair housing education for residents, landlords, community organizations, and housing industry professionals. That's something that we definitely heard, and I think is very important as new tenant protections come online, making sure that there's lots of education for many sectors of the community that go along with that. A third strategy, so simplifying and streamlining information about fair and affordable housing resources, making it easier for people to find the information that they need when they're trying to apply for affordable housing, and if they have fair housing issues, making it easier to find resources to help them as well. In providing housing and services to address severe needs of people experiencing homelessness. So looking at ways to get people into housing faster, and folks who are at risk of homelessness. So providing some homelessness prevention strategies. Another strategy will be assessing the city's Inside Safe program. That program really looks to bring folks that are in homeless encampments inside into housing and providing them with related services. So kind of assess how that program has been working and kind of what geographic areas it makes sense to focus on. And then finally, addressing disparities in access to homeownership. So that might include things related to first-time home buyers, connecting people with more resources for purchasing homes, and providing homeownership assistance, including for multi-generational families. So Thank you, everyone that has voted. We can see that here the priority most frequently identified is related to providing housing and services to people who are at risk of homelessness. That should be a top priority for the city and HECLA. Also addressing disparities in access to homeownership and streamlining and enforcing existing fair housing laws are kind of our top three there. And the Slido code is 220 if you'd like to participate in this. Let's see, I'm gonna jump to our open-ended question so that if there were strategies that you would like to see the city and HECLA consider to address this goal that we didn't have listed, you can provide them here. And maybe while folks are typing, if anyone would like to share an idea aloud, please raise your hands. I know we have several hands up. So let's see.
Before you move on, seems like there's a question. Thank
sure.
you all for all of your messages. We're trying to follow along. To raise your hand, someone is asking, click on reactions at the bottom of your screen, and there should be an option to raise hand. Okay, go ahead, Melissa. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Nancy. Let's see. Charming Evelyn, do you have a comment that you would like to make? I see your hand up.
Yes, actually, there were several, but I'll just try and keep it short. Number one is that really there should be access to policymakers, city council. I have found, and I'm with Sierra Club, and I've found that really you have to push a lot. And I actually know the people in power. And if I have to push, that means a regular person is not even going to get an answer. And, there is really a big disparity in that. The other thing I wanted to mention is because a lot of people brought up Tahoe and it was said that they can only send a letter. That is not true. It is up to the city attorney and it is up to housing to refer cases to the city attorney to prosecute. And I think we should be transparent here with the truth about what it takes and the fact that housing has not been doing due diligence. And so I just really wanted to point that out. And I know that because I speak with the DA all the time, and I had a conversation with the DA up to 2 weeks ago about housing issues and what tenants are facing within the city of LA. And so these are all my comments right now.
Okay, great, thank you. And you're right that those cases can be referred to the city attorney's office to prosecute. So the Tahoe idea would be that there would be kind of a intermediate step where there would be a administrative citation and fine that could be issued with maybe a little bit less of a hurdle than would be present at the city attorney's office before prosecuting a case. So yes, you are right about that, and thank you for saying that. Let's see. So we've had some comments come in here. Housing for seniors on fixed income, that seniors are often ignored. And I saw one at the very beginning, I think related to undocumented seniors and some resources for them as well. Let's see. And I think if someone from Mosaic could put that goal in the chat again, that would be helpful. I think we've had quite a few chats come in, so it might have got pushed up further into the chat. Let's see. Eliminating credit checks and background checks. So looking at ways to reduce some of those barriers related to rental screening. I think that's a good one. And while it may not be perhaps possible at this point to eliminate kind of all of those screenings, looking at ways to reduce some of them and kind of roll back that as a barrier for our tenants. Again, protections for aging population. One comment that's against the Inside Safe program. eliminating credit score requirements. So kind of another comment related to barriers that folks face as they are trying to apply for housing. Well, thank you everyone for those comments. I know we still have some hands up, but I'm going to give the last few people that are typing here some time to finish up, and then we will move on to our next goal. But please do leave your comments in the chat if you've not been able to mention them out loud. So the last goal that we have identified is related to expanding access to opportunity and community assets. So while a lot of these other goals have really dealt with developing housing or improving access to housing, this is focused on neighborhoods. So particularly neighborhoods that we have seen that have historically had some limited access to resources, looking for ways to improve the opportunities that are available within those neighborhoods. And again, I'm going to move to our strategy where we're prioritizing, or our slide where we're prioritizing strategies. But if someone from Mosaic could put this goal in the chat so that people can refer to it, I think that would be helpful. Let's see. So the strategies that we have identified here relate to increasing access to proficient schools in areas that currently have low levels of access. So looking for ways to expand access to education for folks that are in lower performing schools, providing using place-based strategies to really look at ways to make community investments that increase labor market engagement and access to jobs. So helping folks access jobs within their neighborhoods. Improving access to affordable public transits and the accessibility of neighborhoods for active transportation. So things like walking, biking, making sure that ADA accessibility is considered. Improving environmental quality and access to parks and green space, particularly in neighborhoods where we know that there are high pollution burdens or where there are maybe some environmental justice concerns. And then lastly, increasing access to fresh food and health services. So making sure that people have some health resources and fresh foods within the community. So we see that we have some prioritization here, with the highest level being increasing affordable public transit access and walking and biking, increasing access to fresh foods, and then using strategies to increase labor market engagement and access to jobs. So I will jump now to the next open-ended slide. So if you would like to share some strategies that were not included in the previous slide related to improving opportunities within neighborhoods, now would be the time to share that. Okay, we have a comment emphasizing language access as a priority, that there's a need for interpretation and translation services for Korean Americans in LA. So access to disability, or excuse me, access for folks with disabilities, improving that. Developing more community gardens. Let's see, is there anyone who would like to share their ideas, particularly related to ways to improve access to opportunities within neighborhoods? Let's see. Michelle, you've had your hands up for a while. Would you like to share something?
Yes. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I've asked this question now 4 or 5 times. We have a landlord that's refusing to accept rental assistance. We had our 3-day notice, and these, I have to just say it right up front, these rental assistance agencies are not getting back to people quickly enough. We couldn't get it in place quickly enough, and then we're told that he doesn't have to accept it after rent is late. You have to have a 3-day notice, first of all, to apply. Secondly, we got it in as quickly as we could. They offered a direct deposit to him. He's refusing to take it. So this brings me to ask the bigger question. If you've got source of income in place that protected rental assistance recipients to best avoid eviction, and this has been in place before the pandemic actually was announced, 2020 January, in state and federal. It was an addendum to Federal Fair Housing and Employment Act, or FEHA, and Fair Employment and Housing, excuse me. So I would like to know, why are they not enforcing this? We're told by our legal counsel that they don't have to accept it. Well, we're not asking to live where we are living indefinitely, just enough time to give us time to find affordable housing. That's like searching for Holy Grail right now in the city of LA.
Okay.
So how are they enforcing this? And who can I talk to? Do I have to call the city of Los Angeles attorney, like you were just mentioning, to find out how and if this source of income is enforced? Because our attorney's telling us they don't have to accept it. I'm confused. Please explain.
Nancy, do you have an idea about the best resource to contact?
What I'll say is this: we have heard about the source of income in terms of, and which is also will be part of our goals and strategies for the AFH. There has been a number of issues in terms of enforcement of that policy, that which is not only a city policy, but also state law. And we understand that the source of income needs to be strengthened. So that is something that we are definitely looking into. In terms of assistance that we have right now for the source of income enforcement, the city works with the Housing Rights Center, HRC. So any issues of source of income complaints, or any issues in which you feel as though you're not, perhaps your Section 8 voucher or whatever other subsidy that you have is not being accepted or is being denied, then we usually have HRC that attends to that issue. So we do have HRC assistant tenants with that issue, but again, we understand that it does need to be further strengthened. So we can provide HRC's contact information if there's any type of discrimination that is going on, so that HRC can look into that.
Thanks, Nancy. And Georgette, I see your hand up as well. Do you like to share?
Yes. I can't get on.
We can hear you now.
Oh, you can hear me?
We can.
Oh, hi. I was homeless for over a year, 1 year, with my Section 8 voucher. I just found a home on West 82nd and Figueroa. It's not the best neighborhood, and the building that I found is being overran by gang members. And I'm saying that we should not be forced to end up in certain neighborhoods that we really don't want to be in, because we're being held back by a 3-digit credit score. Now, for people like myself that's coming out of homelessness, obviously we're homeless because of things that occurred in our life that got us where we were to be homeless. But people like me now, we want to pick our lives back up. I don't think a 3-digit credit score should hold me back to sleep in a tent on Skid Row for 1 year. I could have lost my life there. You know what I mean? Because of a 3-digit credit score that's holding me back from getting a home that I choose to get. I was looking in Koreatown. I was looking in Hollywood. I was looking in all these areas because I didn't want to be in a certain area. And why? I couldn't live there because of a 3-digit credit score. And that's not fair to us. The ones that want to pick their lives up and get their lives back together and live a normal life. Like, it's not fair to us. I think that's discrimination against us. And you guys passed a law that they can't discriminate against Section 8, but now guess what? They're using the credit score to hold us back. You see, the trick is it's just a whole big game, and it's not fair to us. Now, I'm in a building being overran by gang members, and I didn't choose to be here, but I didn't have a choice. It's not fair to people like me. So I'm coming from Skid Row, and I ended up in a building now that's being overran by gang members. So why is the city not? And my thing is, I know the city give a lot of tax breaks to a lot of these management companies and people that are doing these buildings. So why are you giving them tax-free money or to build these buildings? But then they have their little rules. Oh, if you don't have over 600 credit score, you can't move here because you have a section. That's so wrong. That is just so wrong. And I want to speak on behalf of everybody that's been struggling with that.
Okay, thank you, Georgette.
And
yeah, I think that we saw some comments on the previous slide about that as well, about kind of a credit score as a barrier that folks are facing and potentially a strategy to address that. So thank you. Let's see. Maybe time for one more comment. Let's see. Vanessa, I saw your hand just go up.
Yes. Hi. Thank you for this opportunity. I guess one of my suggestions or strategies that I think could be implemented both to the city and HACLA is really implementing rent control. I think that the idea of a Section 8 voucher is a beautiful thing, but as long as there is no rent control in place, the rent is only going to continue to go up, and it's going to continue to be a barrier for families. I think that it would be beautiful to have a family be able to like keep their housing with one income, as opposed to having to work 2 to 3 jobs to sustain a household. I feel like the quality of life that people are living to be able to pay for housing is not up to par with what is expected. Like I've seen many people express about the increase in not only in living, buying food, buying groceries, paying medical bills, but the wage, I feel like the wage is not up to par. It's not leveled with what the realistic rent is now. So
Okay.
yeah.
So rents that are higher than kind of what people's wages will allow them to afford. And the city does have the rent stabilization ordinance, which limits rent increases for many properties within the city, but point taken that there could be possibilities to expand kind of what is rent controlled. Let's see. Maybe time for one more. Carmen?
Can you listen to me? I would like to have a copy of your slides that you have here and about your speech, because I would like to read. It's easy for me to read because I have the dictionary. And when you talking, it's not easy to me to understand. My English is not so bad, but it's not so good too. That's why I pretended to listen in Spanish, but I couldn't. How I can get the copy of your slides that you have here, and do you use for your speech?
Sure. So we will upload the video, I believe, but I think we could also be able to upload the presentation to the project website as well. So I'll jump forward to a slide here that shows what the project website is. So it's that housing.lacity.org /residents/assessment of fair housing. So if you go to that website, that's where we'll be uploading this information. And some of the other meetings that we did are uploaded there, or all of the other meetings that we did are uploaded there as well. And they have similar presentation. And I think that's done in YouTube, so you can probably slow it down as well too if you would want to listen to it at a slower pace. Let's see. So I think that we got a good list of ideas here for ways to expand access to opportunity within neighborhoods. That was the fifth goal that we had in our study, and the last one that we'll be talking about tonight. But certainly we will take all the input that folks provided through Slido and through the chat as well, and look at how we can incorporate that into revised versions of the AFH draft. So I will move on a bit now so that we can talk about how folks can continue to participate in the assessment of fair housing. So this is definitely not the last chance to participate. And if you would like to join the mailing list, you might have signed up for that when you logged on or when you registered for this meeting. Or if not, you can send an email to lahd.afhpolicy@lacity.org to be added to the mailing list, and then we'll keep you apprised of information as the project moves along. But next steps, so we will be holding a public comment period from late October to early December. So 45 days where the draft will be available for the public to read and to provide comments on. The information that we talked about tonight, particularly related to goals and strategies, will be the final chapter of that draft. So if that's what you're particularly interested in, you could take a look at that final chapter and review these goals and strategies. So the assessment should be available on the website that you see there, and at various locations in the city. Nancy, I don't know if you have a list of places that people could go to physically access the draft.
We haven't released the draft yet, but once the draft is available, it will be available. Hard copies, we'll have a few hard copies available at LHD's public counter sites, as well as at HACLA's sites and also public housing sites as well. But the draft itself, once it's ready, it will be posted on the AFH project's website for the public to be able to view.
And as Nancy mentioned, that's not up currently, but should be in late October. And that'll be a 45-day comment period.
Yes, and announcements will go out once it's released, but we will have announcements out in regards to the upcoming public hearing. But once the actual draft itself is available, it will be, like I said, posted on our website, as well as posted on the Housing Authority's website and also the City of LA site, and various notices will go out to the public.
Then we'll also be having a public hearing on November 8th at LA Trade Tech. That will be an in-person presentation of the draft report and an opportunity, really that hearing will be an opportunity for folks to provide comments on the draft. So if there are things that you wanted to share today that you weren't able to share aloud, but you would like to, that hearing would be a good one to do that at. And throughout the comment period or after today, if you have additional comments, you can provide those to lahd.afhpolicy@lacity.org. Then following that public comment period, we'll be making final revisions to the draft. So that will include revisions based on the input that we got from you today. It will also include revisions based on comments received during the public comment period and hearing. So really preparing that for a final version that will go to City Council and HACLA to work through their approval process. Then once those plans are approved by both the city and HACLA, they will be sent to HUD for their review and for HUD to have as a copy as proof of the city's kind of commitment to furthering fair housing and meeting their AFFH obligation. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for the comments that you provided today. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to join this meeting and appreciate all the input that folks shared. Nancy, I'll turn it over to you for any last wrap up.
Thank you all for joining us. We had quite a bit of folks today, which is great. And I know there are still comments coming through, which we appreciate. The chat that we have, it will be saved and it will be something that we will reference later, so it will not be lost. And as Melissa mentioned, we will have the recording of this meeting posted later on our website for you to view again. If there are any additional comments that you want to share, feel free to email us at our project our project email address. Hopefully someone can place it in the chat again so people can access that. And we will also be welcoming comments on the AFH draft once it's released. Verbal comments as well as written comments. And we hope that you're able to join us in person on November 8th for the hearing, which will be during our public comment period, where we will be hearing comments from everyone. So we hope that you can join us there, provide your verbal comments in person, or if you have any written comments you want to bring in on that day, please do so. The event will take place in the evening. So it will be an evening meeting at LA Trade Tech. So we hope all of you will be there. And if you're not able to attend in person, there will be a live stream option as well. So there will be an option for you to still join online if need be. Okay, so thank you all for joining us, and we will continue to receive more comments going forward. And so just stay tuned for our announcements that will be released. Thank you.
Thank you.